as well as members of our county emergency management team and COO's office.
You even got your emergency management jacket on, I see. I think that's his uniform.
Yeah. It's his Halloween costume today.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. Stacy Cowan, I use she, her pronouns, Director of Government Relations here at Multnomah County. Can I have the next slide, please? So, the reason we're here today, we are on day 31 of the federal shutdown. We are tracking Congress pretty closely right now. Unfortunately, nothing indicates that the shutdown is going to end anytime soon. As it relates to the multi-state lawsuit, so on Tuesday, Oregon joined a coalition of 25 other states, including the District of Columbia, in a lawsuit against the federal administration and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The lawsuit asserts that the administration is unlawfully withholding SNAP benefits from millions of Americans by refusing to use a contingency fund. So during a hearing yesterday, we did hear the judge express skepticism towards the administration's arguments, and I think we're hopeful that there'll be a resolution soon. We're obviously tracking it closely to see if it could result in the federal administration allocating those reserve funds. So just a couple of numbers for you to track. So nationwide, we know that the SNAP benefits cost about $8 billion a month. It serves about 1 in 8 Americans. We are hearing that there's approximately $5 billion available in this contingency fund, so not quite enough to pay for the entire month, but obviously some really valuable resources that could go a long way to serving folks. So we'll keep you updated as we learn more. If we could possibly get an update as early as today on that multi-state lawsuit. Additionally, on Wednesday, 2 days ago, Governor Kotek declared a food emergency. The the Oregon Department of Human Services Office of Resilience and Emergency Management, or OREM, is going to lead the agency response in coordination with Oregon Emergency Management. As part of this emergency declaration, ODHS is going to release $5 million to support Oregon's network of food banks. The specifics about when and how that is being distributed, I believe, is being determined right now. We're waiting for some additional information about what that actually looks like. I think the interest is trying to get it out as soon as possible. And then maybe the last thing that I'll just mention for folks' awareness, we saw yesterday Clackamas County Board of Commissioners also declared a food emergency and authorized $100,000 of their general fund to address the emergency. And that is it for government relations. Happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any, can you share anything a little bit more about the lawsuit and what we're expecting in terms of just the timing and the potential impacts and how that might affect the ability of benefits to get out to folks?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, I think what we heard from the initial hearing was an interest on the judge's behalf to move quickly, understanding that benefits end on the 1st. There was a common agreement that because the federal government notified states in early October, October 11th, I believe, that benefits would not go out in November, that even with a favorable ruling, there will still likely be a delay in benefits. It's not clear exactly when, but again, hearing from the judge that they are interested in moving pretty quickly with some type of resolution, I think there's still an expectation that there could be a gap in benefits rolling out and what that would actually look like. And then, of course, as I mentioned, it's really aimed at the contingency funds that would help fund SNAP benefits during a shutdown, recognizing that there's about $5 billion available in those contingency funds. Yeah. And of course, I'll keep you all updated as we learn more. I think we could very well hear an update today.
Great.
So, just the lawsuit, that's the one that the state of Oregon is also participating in?
Correct, yeah. That's the multi-state lawsuit, 25 states, including Oregon and Washington.
And there's been, in some cases, some compartmentalization of the impacts of rulings on just specific districts or region, but this would be whatever is decision decided by this particular court would be impact nationally. It wouldn't be confined to a specific jurisdiction.
I would want to leave that up to an attorney to make that determination. So let me, I'm happy to ask the question with our attorney's office and follow up. I haven't read that closely, and also I am not an attorney, so I don't want to misstate in terms of what the impact would be. I do believe that Oregon joined the lawsuit with the intention that we would be a part of any favorable ruling. My understanding, and please let me confirm this, is that this would be an impact nationwide, not just the states participating in the lawsuit, because it is directed at the USDA and it is directed at the federal government to utilize the contingency funds to pay for SNAP benefits during the shutdown. But I'll confirm that.
So one other note on the state landscape. I was in contact with Charlene Williams, who's the Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction, about what the status of was funding for breakfast and lunches for students across the state who receive, there's, in some districts, it's the entire student body. And the good news is, at least in the near term, is they have funding through the end of November. As we think about how long this may extend, that the longer it goes on, the closer we'll get to potentially really losing two meals a day for lots of youth and children in the state.
Any other questions for Stacy? Okay. Sarah Morrissey, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Sarah Morrissey. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am the county's Deputy Chief Operating Officer. This morning, we are going to be presenting on the county's activated response to federal actions. It'll be a joint presentation with myself and Chris Voss. So I'm going to hand it over to Chris to set the context in terms of the scope.
Sure. Chris Voss, Director of Emergency Management for Multnomah County. Thank you for being here. Happy Halloween. Yes, we activated actually on Wednesday. We went to a partial EOC activation. And there were actually three aspects to this event of sort of government happenings that we sort of addressed. Both the loss of SNAP benefits, the elevated ICE activity, and community-wide impacts, mostly due to furloughed employees and other programs. Obviously, today's program and events, we're going to focus mostly on SNAP, but all of these things are sort of playing out. And as we communicate both with the county and with sometimes our external partners, we do sort of see a bit of overlapping, but we're going to try our best to sort of stick with SNAP. And I'll talk a little bit about our activation in a little while. Next slide. Oh,
Next slide.
next slide.
So I'll just give a quick overview of the impact of how SNAP benefits, the loss of them will impact the county. We have over 143,000 county residents who will be impacted by the loss of SNAP benefits. That is approximately 20% of recipients statewide. That includes 38,000 children and youth and 18,000 seniors. We are also working with the state to get clarity specifically on the total number related to Multnomah County's SNAP total, so we will make sure to provide that number to you all later today. For context, the county puts approximately $6 million annually of general fund into food-related program offers. This includes programs such as Hunger Relief, WIC, REACH, our ADVSD nutrition program, and others. We have additional resources that come from other fund sources like the state, but this number is related to our general fund contribution. That's a number from March 2025. Next slide. Oh, sorry, go back one slide. And I just really wanted to highlight also the way in which Multnomah County interacts with SNAP. We have a variety of ways. So for example, Bienestar assists households with the application process and conducts outreach. In DSVCO, we refer people to DHS Self-Sufficiency, and they assist in processing SNAP applications. In the Sun Community Schools, our family resource navigators inform families about where to apply for SNAP and help connect them to the program. And in our ADVSD long-term services and support program, we have activity that includes participants actually enrolling in SNAP. So we interact with SNAP in a variety of ways. And I'll hand it back to Chris to review the county's response coordination.
And I just want to say thank you to, we have a lot of folks from DCHS who are parts of many of these programs that were just talked about. So I want to appreciate all of them for being here this morning.
Yeah, next slide, please. And this back and forth is already how Sarah and I are working. Even her short time here, it is literally back and forth as we both sort of address some of these. So EOC partial activation, I wanted to sort of explain a little bit here because there's some focus. We recognize, and there are a lot of folks behind us in a lot of different departments that have been working with SNAP and these other programs for a while. When we're activating and we go to a partial emergency activation, we want to make sure that there's one county, that this is not a DCHS issue and it's for them to address. It is all of Multnomah County that is working to sort of address these issues. We also want to make sure that means we're also leveraging the resources across the entire county. It's not just them. We want to coordinate how we're dealing with sort of our external partners so that it's not 4 different people from 4 different departments all asking them questions and then we potentially have deconflicting information we need to address later. It's also setting the tone. I think often when we have these types of events, one of the dangers that we have is different departments are hearing different pieces of information and therefore they're making different decisions. So we want to make sure that everybody is getting the same information. We are talking as one Multnomah County and then we're communicating with our external folks as one entity. And to help support these, you could see sort of a few things. You've been seeing sit reps that have been coming out for the last few days, and we will continue to do those periodically. We're putting together an incident action plan where we sort of talk about sort of the communications piece, sort of our objectives. So all of these, and the main goal here is we're trying to take what is sort of a small, if this event continues and it gets bigger, we're trying to take what sometimes is a 1-lane highway and build a 5-lane highway. If we need to expand, we want to be able to do just that. The activating the EOC and pulling people in from sort of different agencies, that allows us to do that. And that collaborative is already working on an everyday basis, I think. Right now, I think as we speak, I've got my staff and DCHS are talking to the Oregon Food Bank. So we want to make sure that we're doing this together so we're getting information and we will take that information and share it with a larger group so we can, once again, be well coordinated. Next slide.
Just before you move slides,
Yeah.
I think it's worth noting that I think all the commissioners have been involved in working with city, state, federal delegation, and cross-jurisdictional partners. We all have in our districts partners who play a role, or school districts, or other elected officials. So I just want to note that for the record, which is really one of the intentions of this morning's meeting, to actually be what are all the commission, bringing together all the commission offices so we can really amplify our efforts.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just to follow up, if you are having specific conversations and there are specific asks, I know I kind of said these to some of the chiefs of staff, it's just like, please send them our way. And so I know I got information from 1 or 2 commissioners' offices yesterday. That's important because, yes, we also want to make sure that you've got the same information that we have so that you're also communicating in the same way. It's one of the reasons why we're also sort of setting sit reps. But as we progress operationally, you'll also hear some of the aspects because we want you to be part of that same sounding board. It's not just the chair, it's potentially all of us that are potentially saying the same message. Here's the key, one message, many voices, and that's the path we're going down.
Can we have staff participate in that existing meeting so that because I do think there's some duplication of conversations happening, speaking to what you were saying about departments. So that would be one question is, can staff start participating in these conversations from the commission offices? And then on slide 4, you talked about the amount that we spend in general fund for food access programs. Are we counting anything that we're spending through HSD contracts? Because I can tell you that a lot of those providers are doing food assistance as well.
So to your second question, the HSD numbers were not included in this. This was a preliminary screening. As we continue to do this work, we'll do more analysis to really get an overall detail on the type of activity we're doing with food assistance support.
Yeah, and your first question, can you participate? I want to talk to a little bit with the CO's office about this. I want to make sure that you guys are plugged in. At the same time, sometimes operationally, when you're making the sandwich, not everybody wants to see that. And I'm with a lot of folks in the room in the county that sometimes who's in the room may change part of the conversation. And I want people to feel free to throw out really bad ideas. So, sometimes the more folks in the room, it kind of changes that dynamic. And so there are probably other meetings and other ways we could do this, but we're going to find a way to plug you in so that I think you all have the information you need.
That's definitely what I'll be interested in, and I totally appreciate that, having been in the throes of the severe weather response for so many years. And I think that's part of what is the challenge for commissioners and why we're here today, is not necessarily knowing what's going on. And so I don't want to say that you're not sharing information through the SIT report, because I find those really helpful, but we're in the after, and some of the things in there, I was like, oh, I actually had that same conversation. And so we're coming behind as opposed to on the front end. So we've got to figure out it's more a communication piece maybe than it is a structure.
Great, thank you.
And I
also
think,
just say-
I was just going to say, so I think that one of the things, though, that we can look at is there a mechanism to make sure that we're involving the offices in that, even if it's not sitting in those meetings themselves? Is there like a different meeting or a separate meeting that we can engage? Because I do think it's really important. Like, I know when I was a commissioner, like, the relationships that I had in the district, the ways that I was able to plug into some of the organization or school district or whatever work was really important and helpful, especially like during a time like COVID. And I think this is one of those similar times. So I appreciate that.
One of the reasons for this meeting is, yes, we want to be engaged and plugged in, but also I think that there's a desire for commissioners to play a role, much like Chair Vega-Peterson was just saying. And I think there needs to be a conversation, I think that's the post this, of like, what is the scale of what we're doing? What is our coordinating and convening role beyond our own walls? And also, I think strongly that it's going to take all of us trying to leverage the relationships we have, the connections to what's going on in our districts, that really it would be very difficult for the county to see as a whole, and also be part of the conversation, not hearing about the conversation. I'm not sure how to accomplish that. I know we can't have quorum, but I think there's a desire, I will certainly speak for myself, to be more engaged than getting a situation report.
And I'll say, listen, every emergency I've ever is a little bit different, and this one feels a little different than some of the previous ones. So we will obviously be flexible to try to make sure that you guys have your need, set up systems so that, once again, you guys sort of participate, also have an opportunity to suggest and ideas, because you may be hearing things as well. I want to do that in sort of a constructive way. So that will certainly be something I think we could focus on. And I appreciate the feedback that I'm hearing from everybody. Very valuable.
And I would just like to note, we've had the partial activation meetings for 2 days, so this is all very new. And so we do want to include all of you. We will work on figuring out a way on how to do that best. I do think especially the role that you have within district is so critical and so different than the role that we can play operationally. So we will be convening with your chiefs and determining kind of what that next step is.
I would also say, and I really appreciated the materials we've received so far about just like what's the landscape. I do think the purpose of this meeting is sort of one of the awkward things, is that if we're going to be discussing things as a commission, we have to do it in a public meeting. So here we are. But it also was just given the scope and scale, and knowing that we're not, the county can't backfill at all the need. However, so that, which means that our work has to be really intentional versus just like throwing out ideas like without sort of putting them within into a larger plan, and like what is the sort of competitive advantage of the county's engagement that we can, where the place where we can add the most value. So I think that's what part of this discussion is. And each of us have relationships that can be, used and leveraged by the county to have a much bigger impact.
Next slide.
Thank you. And building off of that, I'm going to give a quick overview of some of the activities that have occurred to date. Much of this has been shared in those situational reports that have gone to the commission and the operational teams. So human services, a variety of programs. I'm just going to highlight a few items. So food security response, the teams are bracing for an overwhelming need and working with food security coalition partners to ensure we're coordinated in our response and elevating their needs. Chris is going to provide additional details related to operational requests from these partners, but the overwhelming majority to date have asked for financial assistance and communication support. For the SUN program in schools, the school districts are partnering with community organizations for support, including school-based behavioral health, and staffing SUN food pantries and increasing the backpack program are priority needs that we're working with them on. ADVSD, we are increasing the number of caseworkers for next week as we're planning for an increased level of walk-in traffic and looking into extra staff for case managers who determine benefits. And then in the communication space, we've heard requests for coordinated communication, again, speaking as a county with one voice. We've created a website, multco.us/food, that has updated information and the most accurate list in terms of resources for community. We've also developed materials that have been shared out through a press release, our social media channels, and internal communications to ensure, again, that we're speaking with one consistent voice. And we'll continue to work with our partners to identify needs and continue to be the hub for coordination and communication across the county. And I'll hand it to Chris on the logistical side.
Yeah, so next slide.
Question I had about all the lists. So there's a list that, I love the list that we shared, and there's been lists shared by school districts and lots of other partners. One of the things I'm interested in, this is a sort of bigger macro organizational question, is, we put out the list, is everybody all of a sudden going to be going to the Sunshine Division? Or it seems like with just putting out a list that's, there's not intentionality of is there even enough food? Or, it's going out to tens of thousands of individuals. Have we given some thought about how we prioritize those lists or sort of provide guidance? Because I could see it being almost like somebody trying to find a shelter bed, of calling through of a whole host of organizations. I mean, I went, for example, one of the resources was Find a Fridge. That was shared, and I looked for the refrigerators in my district, and I think there were 3, and one of them was it said, actually there's no refrigerator there. And actually the refrigerators don't have that much food anyway, so if somebody were going to I'm going to go to there. So how do we manage it versus sending a flood to, some organizations that don't have any capacity?
Commissioner, I like exactly where you're going. I've got 2 more slides, and we're going to start to talk about this, because I think sometimes we do this really broad paintbrush, and then we start to get more and more targeted so that our information means more. We're early in the event, and we're sort of evolving there, but 2 more slides, and then I'm going to focus a little bit on your exact question.
Okay.
I think we might
I was
sort of
asking
get there.
because we had the list here, and I was like, oh.
I don't know if you want to sort of talk about the specific list, but I could tell you from, if we go to the next slide, lists. Yeah. I've been. Oh, it's the previous. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the first things that we try to do amongst everybody that's, and I've been hearing, it's oh, we need volunteers or we need people. And we're like, okay, there's a lot of organizations out there. Let's start to understand what the need is. What we're trying to do in the long run is try to target, okay, is what do people need, and then how do we direct people to that specific resource when they can. So yesterday we actually started a call down. We started with another list, but we received a list here's 115 different pantries and organizations that are providing foods to underserved communities. And just okay, before I just assume and just say, hey, call your local pantry and see if you could volunteer, let's see if that's actually what they need. And so here's this call that we said, and we started to say, they first, even though we weren't specifically quizzing on money, everybody's please give us money. And I want to take a second on this because I think it's an important note. They all said, some of them said, yes, you could give us food, that's helpful. But if someone goes out there and buys a can, I could buy that can for half the cost they can. So you're better off giving me the money. It will go twice as far. So please, like, there are some places where food matters, but money for them matters, and we heard that over and over and over again. I think probably many of you sort of knew that. There were some that said, I'll take food donations, but I'd rather have the stuff out of their pantry, and like I said, don't go buy food specifically for it because I think I could do more with the money. Volunteers, this is an interesting one. We weren't sure, and there were different volunteers, the transportation support volunteers. A lot of the people were like, I need people to basically drop off meals at people's homes. Some people were like, I need help to sort of bag stuff. So understanding the specifics, so it's not broad lists. Where we're going, this is ultimately if you want to be a volunteer and you have the ability to drop off food, what we want to do is work with these organizations, say, okay, we've got 100 organizations, these 30 are looking for volunteer support. This is specifically what they're looking for. We can use and leverage systems to sort of recruit volunteers, but some of them have their own process, like, you know what, I don't want you to just send me a person, I need to talk to them. So they've got to call me and do that. And so this is where we're going next. But part of this starts with an assessment. It starts with an assessment of like the boots in the ground, the people that are doing this work, and what they ultimately need. We'll go to next slide because it's kind of as we sort of how we leverage our resources. And I also want to say in the 10 minutes that I was on a phone call with the food bank this morning, and we said, hey, volunteers, do you need box trucks? Do you need resources to help? And they're like, forklifts. So that's why the conversation's important. You know, maybe it's a pallet jack, but the big organizations, you're going to see us probably hold their hand and sort of walk through understanding exactly what they need. And there are some instances where we might be able to supply or provide. There may be somewhere we're communicating with you. It's like, we need to leverage, I only have so much of this. I could tell you the food bank has more box trucks than I have. The county, that's not what we do. But we also have partners. There are schools, there are the city, there are other resources that maybe we could leverage. So if they turn around and say 3 forklifts and I could provide them one, maybe we could also do the legwork to find them some of those additional resources. So this is about leveraging that, but it's about taking those lists and thinking about what's next. And so I believe there's a few things here. One, targeted support to some of the big organizations like the Oregon Food Bank. We could potentially do that. Do you need a box truck? Will that make a difference? Maybe we could do that. Then there's a lot of the pantry organizations that they need volunteers. Maybe they're looking for food. Can we target people so that if you live in, Southeast, you could be like, oh, these are the 10 organizations, and this is specifically what they're looking for. Because sometimes it's not even just as specific as food. Someone mentioned refrigeration. Guess what? Dropping off things that are maybe frozen or need to be refrigerated, if they don't have that, that's problematic for it. So we want to provide that direction for food, provide the direction for volunteers, provide targeted support for the larger organizations. I think these are things that we also, one of the things that we do that a lot of these organizations don't have is the ability to communicate and have it reach as many people as we could reach. But I want to make sure that when we're reaching out to folks, it is so much more targeted, and it's not just, here's a list of 115 organizations that you could help, give them a call. That's not helping the organizations, and it's not helping the people that ultimately need the food, so we've got to be much more targeted. I'm with you, and so I think the list, as there's I want to sort of end this slide with thinking about this conceptually, because we heard this a lot. There is a sense of urgency right now. There absolutely is. But this is a marathon, or could be a marathon, depending on how long things goes. So thinking about how we progress is also important. Building the relationships now, so as things change in a week or two, one of the things we do is collecting the email addresses so we can more effectively communicate with these organizations, which is something was a little bit harder because we had sporadic phone numbers and, okay, here we just have an address. Do we have to look them up? It's pulling that together so that we can communicate easier with them, they can communicate with us, understand the needs, and then we can ponder and ask the questions, is this something we could help with? Is it something maybe one of our external partners could help with? I have zero refrigeration capability. Metro has refrigeration capability. Maybe they could help. So I'll stop there. I know there's a lot of things, and we are a little over day 2, but I'm happy that we're progressing in a sense that we are starting to get some specifics, starting to hear information, and now we've got to sort of operationalize this, but we're doing it for the long run. I heard a piece of information, and I'll leave you with, and it was also from one of the providers we talked to, and they said every time something happens and every time there's an emergency, the rest of the world rebounds and we don't. So after COVID, the rest of the world kind of rebounded, but we were left with 50% more people that needed that service that never rebounded. And that's part of the fear. That's one of the things that they are worried about, that they just won't rebound. So we are not making long-term commitments, but I think that this is also elevating this conversation where there may be other conversations like what is going on in this world that unfortunately the burden and frustration that we're hearing from these folks is it's not just about the SNAP cancellation. It is about an organization and organizations that have been greater and greater taxed, and now they are where they are, that they don't feel like not everyone is in a great position to support this more immediate or more acute issue. I hope that answers your question, because I don't like, lists aren't helpful for me. They're a starting point.
Yes, it's helpful, and I'll be interested in how we sort of keep drilling that down, because I think about just your slide with like the most important thing was monetary support, and it's like, the county isn't in a position necessarily to provide that in any sort of meaningful way. But we do have other ways to be helpful, and so figuring out, and then also the people who we're pulling in of like what they have to offer. I mean, some of the initial feedback from school districts that I received was like they don't have money either to put in the pot, but they do have sort of a natural distribution network because there's a school in every neighborhood. Most of them have either their own like food pantry or a community partner or a Sun school where they can do that. So starting to get building out these other places where people could plug in. I mean, for example, I know Portland Public Schools, like they send box trucks out every day to schools with breakfast and lunch. And how do you build on that? Can you just piggyback on top of those deliveries? So that would be the thing when I'm thinking about how we activate our other partners or build a bigger movement is these other pieces, and the monetary support is probably a niche group of where people have resources that they can put into the pot.
Yeah, and the monetary piece, I think that's, there's a governmental component maybe, but I think that there's a motivated community on this, and it's about leveraging sort of also the folks. And so I don't think anything that individually or collectively are going to fill the whole gap that exists. So we are trying to improve this situation. I think we all kind of are aware of the magnitude of the deficit.
The list is extensive and clearly not exhaustive. So if other folks want to be included in what we're pushing out there, how would they do that? Do we have something, can we get a simple Google form up? Is there something that if we can send everybody to that same website, if they want to be added, they can just, I know you all aren't the IT folks, so it might be the wrong people to ask, but I'm just curious because a lot of there's a lot in North Portland and there's a lot more that I know about. I also just received a list from Home Forward where they have food pantries. It would be great for us to look at that because that gets to a lot of our folks who are low income. I'll forward that to you all. So that's just some of how do folks get added and their resources get added.
We will communicate with you later today on if you guys have more, because the best thing to do is have at least a complete list. And we recognize, even in the list that I had yesterday, we were calling down organizations, and I kept seeing organizations added. So there were people sort of identifying them.
And that also just reminds me of COVID, where there were the spreadsheets of like different places that people can go for different resources and organizations. And so I think that we can bring back some of those things that we had during that time.
I think particularly two things jump out to me to we may need to play a role. There are people who are not going to obviously be able to make it to a food bank. And what is our role, particularly if either a community organization identifies that they have a list of people, or our senior and disabled services may have lists, but I think we want to make sure that we're aware and able to help connect resources to people who are not going to be able to show up at a distribution site. And then, the other issue I'm concerned about, and I don't know what the right way of supporting this is there are going to be people who have already had or are making decisions now where they have to prioritize food over rent or other utilities, whatever. And so I do want us to, yes, this is a food emergency, but it will show up in other places. So to the degree that we have the ability to work with partners on not shutting off people's electricity, or, what kind of organizations or us could do very short-term additions to rental assistance, just things that keep people from, if they have to make an emergency decision around their resources for food, that we don't let that be a totally destabilizing event.
I just, on piggybacking on that, because I haven't worked in specifically DCHS programs, but generally our client assistance is flexible enough that it can be any of the things. Have we given that direction to our departments that if they have client assistance dollars, whether it's utilities, rent, or food, that we have that flexibility?
Well, sure. I personally have not had that conversation, but we'll take that back to the DCHS director, who's here in the room with us, Rachel Pearl. So we'll follow up on that.
Yeah, but that is exactly like, as we're talking about like what the response and how flexible we need to be, that is exactly part of it. And so that's where one of the things that we're looking at is like, do we need to, there is a lot of flexibility already in client assistance and what those things can be used for. So I think the fact that we're bringing in more case managers and we're deeply communicating with our providers to really find out what's needed. And the memo that I put out did list out like all of the things that we've been hearing, what providers are looking for. It's, do we need any special, do we need a declaration of emergency to make these things happen? So far, it seems like no. It's just the direction to be able to do that. But those are the types of things that we're looking at to make sure that we can be as flexible as possible to what's happening with the resources that we have already provided.
And I don't want to lose the delivery of food component that you raised as well.
I did also want to say that there are some externals. So I could tell you it was Wednesday afternoon or so, we contacted utilities to understand if there is a change. And that might have happened even before SNAP about their cutoffs. There were a lot of government furloughed employees where sometimes they have programs like, okay, we're not going to cut these things off. So trying to understand if their posture has changed. We haven't turned those into asks yet. But we're trying to understand where they are, because I'm sure, much like we are discussing this here, they are discussing that amongst themselves, like what should their posture be. And then it would be great if there was also some consistency across our electrical providers, so the message becomes a little bit easier to deliver, so that people don't fret about one piece if in fact the policies change and they're like, okay, I know my power won't be cut off if those organizations make that decision.
I'm thinking about all of the ways in which the county intersects with individuals who also may be on SNAP, and just communications, like what do we have, going up tomorrow, even like a sandwich board or like information at the libraries or our health clinics, so that we're delivering information in a variety of different ways. Because we have those existing relationships.
Yeah, so I could tell you this subject came up today. It came up specifically with HSD and sort of how they communicate with others. So I think in early one of my slides, like I said, this is about trying to have one message and use every tool that we have to sort of get out there. Posters, signage. We're trying to understand if there's upticks in throughputs in some of our organizations as well. So targeted, but we have a great capacity to get the information out there. Like I said, a lot of forward-facing. It is the library. It is the HSD teams that are out there sort of talking directly to sort of unhoused, houseless folks. It is the Department of County Human Services. So all of these mechanisms, I am sure when, as our message develops and we have clear and concrete information, as that information grows and as it changes, building those networks so that people also know where they can get information on a regular basis is going to be really key for us. I said we're day 2.5. I'm happy. I'm happy we're getting, and I'm happy with sort of we're planning. Like I said, we are assessing the message. Even as we talked to some groups today, they're like, as money does come in potentially from the state, they said that check doesn't become food overnight. In fact, it takes a really long time. They said weeks. So, you know, it is, there may be some things hopeless, and I think they've got a sense of urgency too, but I think that's part of the understanding too, because I want to work with these organizations so we don't also bombard them with things that they can't possibly support because even the resources they're getting are not quite in place yet. So that understanding is going to be really important for us. So even such like signs at a library saying, hey, in this neighborhood, here are the 5 places you can go. I don't want them to go there and then find out that there's nothing, and then that becomes a situation where they won't ever, we lose the trust battle, and then I lose all future messages in that situation.
Oh, related to that, as I think about both the need, I also think the role the county should play in helping to direct support so that, one tiny organization isn't totally overwhelmed and then there's a ton of unmet need. And I also think it's extremely difficult message to tell everyone to donate to a bunch of different organizations and their various ways of donating. So I wondered if we had talked to any of our foundation partners, like the Oregon Community Foundation or others around, could there be a strategy where there was a fund that people donated to in which there was an ability to distribute as capacity can handle it? Because it's also easier to do a campaign where you drive people to a place. I think there's going to be needs that are not necessarily just buying food. And I don't want to hit a spot where we're not funding those, or there are communities that, just maybe their food pantry just isn't part of the Oregon Food Bank or whatever. And we don't want to have groups or parts of our county left out. So I don't know what that looks like, but I want to think about it because I think we should play a role, and it doesn't have to be us. I think there are people who it might be more appropriate, but once that was established, we could push that out so that I just worry it will be very hard to push out, here are 180 organizations doing something, give to some of them in all the different ways in which they accept donation.
I think it's a great point. We want people to give to all the organizations they know, but also to have some place where if somebody, this is going to the Oregon Hunger Fund or whatever.
Yeah, I definitely, that's what you and I talked about yesterday, because we did that at the state during COVID, was push money out through OCF. It wasn't the incoming of donations because we had federal dollars, but that is something I think that could be helpful for us to explore with foundation partners. I want to come back to utility assistance because Stacy and I talked yesterday about reaching out to the power companies to understand if they're going to do any moratorium on shutoff or anything like that. Is there any updates there? And I will add that I know Pacific Power has a rate increase that goes into effect today or tomorrow at the same time that we're dealing with this. And so just curious if we were successful in having any conversations there.
I don't have any updates there. I think that that's one of the, sorry, I was making notes on the philanthropic side of things as well. So I think that that's something absolutely that we're going to try to track down today and figure out what the policy is. And I think to Chris's point, I think I want to make sure that we're all on the same page so that we can get some type of consistent response. But that would be something where hopefully we get a positive response if there's a moratorium, and then we can utilize that to create some consistency across different organizations. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions for Chris, Sarah, or Stacy?
Yeah.
Commissioner Jones-Dixon.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation in 2 days. That's with with everything that you presented. Job well done. I made a call to a service provider this morning. They said that they're a food provider. They said that you guys are scheduled to meet this afternoon, both you and Sarah Ryan. So you guys are knocking it out of the park. Within the assessment, there's 2 things that came to mind. One of the things that you mentioned is just we haven't rebounded from COVID, and our office and myself will continue to think about, like, how are we supporting the health and well-being of everyone? It sounds like Department of Human Services is woven into your into the work. Do you have what you need in order to do the work? I believe we made some adjustments as far as the budget is concerned, and that's a pretty open question. But is there should we, when we think of when we're talking about budgets and investments and things like that, should we? I guess a question to the board: should we be investing more in the work that Director Morrissey and
I'll start here and just say, operationally, what we're doing, we are doing this with existing people and existing budgets that we're sometimes moving around. I'm not saying I might not have some folks that accrue some overtime this weekend, but I have not made a specific ask as of yet. I think this will depend a little bit on where we go, and if there's an idea suggestion that is outside my budget, whether it's something I wouldn't normally do or it's a dollar amount that we can't absorb, and then I would work through sort of the normal process. But I'm not asking for dollars today. I think there are a lot of other organizations that want dollars. I'm not the person here today. I wanna make sure that when I come, if I'm in front of the board and asking for dollars, that I could be like, this is exactly what it's gonna do, this is what I'm gonna ask for, and this is what we need. We might find that the greatest ability to support this level within what I do is not a huge dollar amount. It's with the systems, it's with the people, it's with our comms. But I don't know where I'm going to be in 2 or 3 weeks. I kind of know where I'm at.
I guess my
2
question
days.
is, could you include that in the assessment if there are specific investments that we need to make? So that's a good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I-
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, it's on that point, just with I know there's a significant budget that you have around severe weather shelter, and while we're not even on the brink of winter yet, we know that that can be really costly, but do you have the ability is that fungible? I don't remember us restricting it to.
It's not very fungible.
Okay.
I have to be very careful. Those are SHS dollars. This problem is larger than people just experiencing houselessness, and the
Yep.
dollars that I have, which tend to focus primarily on unsheltered houseless. I would have to ask questions, but I'm not as comfortable. But like every department, I've got a little bit of general fund dollars where thing gets postponed. Okay, well, we won't do this plan next week. Let's reallocate some of those folks. Right now, that's primarily what we're seeing. It's reallocation of folks that were working on other projects to address this. And I'm not the only one. DCHS was part of that call down yesterday, so I don't know where those half a dozen people came from. But that's where we are right now. But I want to be clear, we'll come and we'll make asks if we're in that situation.
So just a question on that. I think it's an excellent point. When we have the extreme weather emergencies and you activate the amazing county, there's a county mobilization. The cost related to that, is it the overtime because it's overnight? I'm just trying to understand, versus if somebody has a day shift at the county in their regular job, and then they go do a day shift at a shelter that's partly during their workday, they're not paid overtime. Is it the overnight hours or the addition?
There are, and I could spend 4 hours on severe weather, but just when we talk about staff, the departments actually this year absorb those costs, but there are additional costs. There's incentive pay that we often, that 20%. It just so happens not. It seems like every emergency happens on a Friday or Saturday, so there's weekend costs. So you've
It's like
got
when your
overnight-
kids get sick, it's never during the day.
So we do, and the tough thing there is we've tried to project over the course of years. This year, that budget obviously was diminished. So if we have a busy year, you'll probably see me here, unfortunately, again, asking for dollars to support severe weather. The question about, are these things fungible? My general fund resources are fungible. A lot of severe weather, there's a small portion, but a majority of it's not fungible.
Yeah, thank you. That was I couldn't remember how much SHS or general fund was in that pot, so thank you.
And so just to give us a ballpark sense, and not right now, but could you share out with the offices, like, when you have an activation, what the personnel costs are, whether it's incentive or the overtime? Pardon?
But I didn't mean to take us down a severe weather rabbit hole. I just was curious about the dollars. I totally appreciate what you're saying, but I also know we have a lot today, so I just want to, if you're
I didn't say
comfortable-
today, but I'm
If we could
following
just
on the meeting just
go
to get
back
a
to the
sense of what.
topic.
Yeah, ballpark.
Of what the cost may be?
Ballpark last February, personnel cost was about $300,000.
And it is part of a county response, not just the emergency management. So I think we are actually, even though we hope that the severe weather is not coming anytime soon, we are already gearing up for severe weather preparedness at the county and with some of our other partners. And so we can, if it's helpful for the board to get an understanding of what that looks like at the county, both internally and externally, we can make sure that happens.
I'll bring this back to sort of the SNAP. One of the considerations that my office has, if this goes through winter, I now have competing issues. We talk about priorities where if I'm lending supplies or I've got staff working on this and the question is the severe weather, it's like I've got to sort of switch, and does that change how we support things operationally related to SNAP?
Yeah, and the reason I was asking,
I just have one other question.
Yeah,
I'm assuming that you're working with the City of Portland's emergency management team, City of Gresham, Kelly Landeville, also she retired recently, but I'm assuming there's communication and coordination there.
Yes.
And if, okay, great.
Yeah, we're working with them. We are probably going to stand up daily meetings next week to ensure we're coordinated across the jurisdictions.
Great, thank you. That was my last question.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank the work that you're all doing, but all of the departments for leaning in. I think the updates that you're providing are really helpful in terms of seeing what the work that's happening across the county with the different departments. And I really appreciate the conversation today of getting some additional ideas out there on the table that we can incorporate as this moves forward. We don't know how long this is going to last. Hopefully not long, but we honestly don't know because it feels like our federal government is broken right now. And the need to really show up at the table and figure out something so that we can get the government working again is a priority. But I really just am proud of the way that the county has been stepping up and leaning in, along with our partners, to responding the best we can in this situation that isn't of our making, and we can't completely fill the holes, but we're doing the best we can with what we have. So thank you all, and thank you to the county for that.
Thank you. No, we're here.
Okay, thank you. So now we're moving on to the discussion part of the meeting for today, where we're talking about potential responses for to SNAP cuts. And I know that there was some interest in talking a little bit about some of the other things. I think one of the things you may have noticed in the first SIT-Rep update that Chris sent out yesterday is that the conversations really right now are focused on SNAP, but the convening that's happening of the county departments is a little broader and looking at all of the federal impacts that are happening. And so I know that there might have been some interest in having that conversation in this at this meeting too, which I'm happy for if folks want to lean in that way as well.
I wanted to talk a little bit about how we envision the county's role. This was wildly helpful and really encouraging, like thrilled about what's happened over the last 2.5 days. But I'm kind of curious. I'll just put what I would like out there and people can respond. You know, I do think this commission probably has amongst it a tremendous network, as does, I think, many other electeds. Although I think we wish we could write huge checks. I'm sure we're all in the same position, and that's unfortunately not available. But I do want us to think about being a convener on that level, not just the incredible work that Chris is doing with all the organizations and their operational piece, but I think, especially if this is not a very short-lived thing, we're gonna have to figure out how everybody's networks are plugging in, so that we don't miss communities, and also that we are helping it be the most coordinated as possible response. So I would like us to consider being a convener, both on that operational side, but also on a leadership side of trying to get people to buy into a coordinated effort, whatever that looks like. Everyone brings their piece, but the number of calls and back and forth, and who's doing this, and what's the county doing, what's the city doing, and I think that there's going to be the nuts and bolts, but then there's going to be the who's asking people to join, who's making the asks related to could your organization mobilize through their network for volunteers? Could you send out this ask to your communities? Which I think is kind of a layer that's different than what Chris and team are talking about. They're leave the experts to the mechanics, but where's our leadership role? So I bring that up for conversation.
Yeah, I sort of think that we should, for when I think of district just out in East Multnomah County, I envision us funneling things through Chris Cassese Connect or through the emergency management team, because I have a tendency to start to project management and get too involved. But to know that we have I'm not even gonna say my anxiety, my concern has lifted over the last 2 hours, hearing about the work that you're doing, and then that we're coordinated as a county together, and we're leaning on the experts. I mean, you're an expert in emergency management, and this is indeed emergency. And last week when I spoke, I mentioned just the practice and the discipline, seeing that we're going to be in a marathon for the next 3 years. I think it's for my own sanity, going to be working with the team, sharing those concerns, and then trusting that we are building out a system of care that actually meets the moment. And it's a huge trust exercise that we all sign up for. So that's going to be my own personal practice and how I envision the communication. I guess my question is when is it too much as far as communication? I guess it could never be too much as far as overly communicating. So Chris, get ready, and Sarah, get ready for that.
I think
looks like you're already ready.
Yeah, I would say that I don't think over-communicating is, especially, again, you all know what's happening in your districts better than anyone. I do think, though, that it's that outward messaging where that can be get complicated, especially if there's different messaging or, as everybody's trying to respond, of course, there might be some things that, we're going to need to fix. But the goal, and this has been brought up a couple of times already, is that that we have one clear message that we're making sure, so that we're sharing the right information, we're providing true assistance to people as they're dealing with incredible hardships, with figuring out how to feed their families, keep their families housed, all of those, it keeps the lights on. So I think that's to me, but so I think the inflow of information is great, and then let's make sure that we are sharing information and being coordinated on those outward messagings, and really wanting to make sure that the county as a whole is supporting you and your offices in the information you have to share outwardly as well.
And We need a new metaphor because a 3-year marathon sounds horrible. I think some of that speaks to what Chris started to allude to, right? This is the crisis response, and then Commissioner Brim Edwards and I had shared a memo of, there's a medium-term response and a long-term response that's needed. And so some of that to me is, my understanding is the governor has convened a table. We should be at that table, and I'm not sure that we are right now because this crisis moment of SNAP is just this moment, but we also know that HR 1 is going to have an impact on SNAP for the longer term. So while yes, we want to be definitely responsive in the crisis, it's the longer term planning to me that also is a concern. And I think, Commissioner, you and I have talked a lot about agriculture and food security and how are there ways to think about those longer term pieces of being more able to provide food security in our community that doesn't always have to rely on federal government. And so that to me, Commissioner Moyer, is that medium term, is where is that convening? And if the governor's convened a table, who is at that table? Do we need a different one? What's being discussed there? And Multnomah County, as the largest county in the state, should be sitting there.
Or creating it, yes, or making it.
And Stacey, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but has there been any movement on that part of the conversation and that convening? And I don't want to pretend I have all the details correct.
Yeah, again, Stacey Cowan, Government Relations. So my understanding is that the governor has pulled together a table of folks to help identify priorities ahead of the short session. So it's not specific to SNAP, and it was a little bit bigger, and I'd heard about that prior to sort of this issue. I have requested that Multnomah be able to participate in that discussion. I haven't heard back, but I think that's because we're kind of focused on this right now. But my understanding is it was a little bit broader, and it was about identifying the priorities that the governor should be looking at for the short legislative session. And to be really clear, I think that it is in the context of what we're hearing from legislative leaders around some possible cuts coming up, and it's probably in relation to the cut lists that state agencies are preparing ahead of the legislative session. So where to preserve, where to prioritize, and hopefully where to avoid cuts.
So this, I'm just going to say, can be put in the parking lot because this feels like a much bigger conversation that we need to have. I think it's critical that we're sharing and they understand what we have funded and where we've made reductions so that it's not duplicative. And how are we, again, I'm not saying you need to carry this, but I think it's probably worth us having some conversation of how we actually share a priority list up to the state so that they can really understand and reflect what we've been able to do locally.
And you're absolutely right. And getting the commission's input into that is really important. I've also convened meetings with a table that's Health Share Care Oregon, the city, Metro, the other county chairs, and so we are actually talking about how, as organizations, we are dealing with the federal impacts. But part of that is also like where are our shared priorities, and how can we make sure that we, as we're making cuts or thinking about decisions, we're not both cutting in one area that's a priority. But a part of that is also like lifting up, where do we need the state to how can we make sure that the state is aware of our most severe needs, our most critical issues, and the things that we either, and unfortunately it's not like asking for more resources, it might be a little, but it's mostly like, please don't cut this area because this is something that is going to be impacting a large group of us.
And Commissioner, I think that a lot of what you're talking about will be a part of the work that we're going to do while we prepare our legislative agenda. So my office is hoping to be able to engage with all of you over the next couple of weeks to really identify what our priorities are going into session. And I think that that is the story that we need to tell, is to make sure that our legislature and our delegation understand the totality of what's happening at the county level. And so coming out of this last legislative session, what did the cuts or the underfunding look like? What does it look like with our budget scenario? And when you layer in the impacts of the federal spending and budget cut impacts. So it's that total story, and I think we had a great conversation, and I really liked your idea of, in addition to sort of an agenda, but what does the narrative look like? How do we explain what's actually happening in the community and how do we direct the legislature to sort of the most urgent needs. And I do believe that that's a part of the work that we're going to do over the next couple of months, both identifying our legislative agenda as we do some of the one-on-one meetings that I envision with you all and our legislative delegation, the legislative breakfast where we'll engage our delegation, and then of course the work that we'll do in the legislative session. So I hope that, that this is all a piece of that, and I think that that's the important story that we can tell is what does the full impact of all of the different jurisdictional budgets look like on the community.
Can I ask, since you're here, what exactly does the exact language you use, what exactly is entailed in the executive order declaring a hunger emergency?
Yeah, Commissioner, it's a full, I actually was just double checking because it was interesting, some of the language around a food emergency. So it very much is pointing towards the impact of the SNAP reductions. I can share a copy with you. I have a copy of the emergency here. The ORS that it states is the same Oregon revised statute that's used for declaration of a state emergency. So again, I want to stay in my government relations lane. I am not an attorney. I think our attorney can help us decide sort of what that exactly means for our local government, but it is a formal state of emergency under ORS 401. I can share the language with you so you can see exactly what the language is and how it's directing the state agencies to engage with local partners.
I appreciate that because it would be helpful to understand sort of what that unlocks and just like how we might connect into that if it's something that has some actual substance besides just obviously the declaration, which is important.
And I'll ask our attorneys for that. I think they can give us an analysis of what that means for us. I do think there are some limitations in terms of a state emergency versus a county emergency, and so I'll help get that clarification in terms of what that unlocks and maybe what it does not.
Thank you.
We don't necessarily have the, very, the food emergency versus how, like we have emergency declarations around things. So, yeah, thank you.
I'm wondering, and I don't know if this is a question for Chris, if the county declared a state of emergency related to this, what does that unlock, if anything?
So
Yeah, that's probably better for the county attorney than myself. But I want to reiterate, in this case here, the state did declare an emergency. It wasn't, they threw the word food in front of it, but it was a full-blown emergency. So I don't know if the county attorney wants to talk a little more.
Right. If the county declared a state of emergency and put food in there, I don't know if it matters if there's an adjective, but what is that? What's the practical effect?
So I can, Rob, do you want to come up? So declaring a state of emergency gives flexibility with some of the contracting, procurement, and other services that we do. So it frees us up to be able to go around some of our normal procurement and contracting standards to give departments flexibility to respond to an emergent situation where timeliness and other factors is an issue. And now that Rob's sitting down, I'll let him take over on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Rob Sinnott from the County Attorney's Office. Commissioner, it's outlined in our code, Chapter 25, and there's a list in there of the authorities. Here, probably the most relevant one would be the suspension of procurement rules so that we could do emergency procurements if that was the plan. But there are other things that are listed there.
We can make a curfew.
My question for Chris and the broader county organization is that something that we should be contemplating, the need for that flexibility and the commission considering that? So
I'll say this, but it's the chair.
Yeah, so I would declare the state of emergency, and that's something that we're looking at right now to see if it's necessary in order to respond to the situation, or do we already within our own contracts have the flexibility to make sure that our providers and the county can respond to the situation as it is.
There's nothing that I've presented to the chair that we couldn't do without, and if there is, then that's something that she would consider.
But you're saying right now there's, you have the tools to respond.
Correct.
I think we've got some different things that commissioners brought to the table. I want to just put one that I have worked with Commissioner Brim Edwards on, which is a proposed resolution. Hopefully you have all seen that. Does it need to get read out? I'm like the worst person to read thing out loud. Don't have the dyslexic girl, I'll have to read out loud. But I worked with Commissioner Brim Edwards on this because I thought it was important. Some of these clearly are happening, but I think I wanted to send a formal signal that this is the resolve of the commission to move this direction. Happy to open it up for conversation. Does it have to be read? Yes, so I move to adopt the proposed resolution related to Multnomah County's emergency response to federal actions, including but not limited to SNAP.
So I'm looking over to Kathy to see if there's.
Oh, I just was going to raise a concern I think Jenny has raised before she left. Oh, thank you. I don't want to raise a concern that Jenny raised before she left about the notice, as the resolution wasn't provided as part of the notice for the special meeting. So
Was in the notice of the special meeting.
was it attached? Oh, mine, maybe I'm not the right information. So if there was a proper notice of the resolution.
But this is an emergency meeting.
So I would call your attention to the letter that was signed by all five, the commissioners and the chair that calls this meeting. And the last line says, the special meeting may include potential action on a resolution directing county action.
Right, I'm aware of that. I just was raising that as a possible concern. But regardless, with a special meeting, you'll need to use a unanimous consent, right? And then even if it's done at a special meeting, it will need to be ratified at the next regular meeting. So I just wanted to call your attention.
So I'm asking for unanimous consent to bring forward this resolution.
So my understanding is we don't need a unanimous consent to bring it forward. We need a unanimous consent to actually approve it.
Correct.
Got it. So that's a unanimous vote.
So I want to make sure that this is right, Kathy. So we can have a conversation about the resolution, its contents and everything without officially bringing it forward?
Yeah, absolutely you can. Like, if you wanted to try to pass something today, then you need to follow the rules about voting. But if you wanted to simply discuss it, there's no reason that it needed to be.
But we could vote today. It would have to pass unanimously.
Yes.
And it wouldn't, right.
So again, I don't know I don't know what anyone's asking, but it sounds like the commissioner's making a motion to have it be formally, right. So.
Correct.
And it's been seconded.
But
Commissioner
Chair, I want to
Bernadette.
understand your question. You don't need to have, it doesn't need to be if you want to discuss it, but as the commissioner pointed out, the meeting the notice did talk about potentially voting on something. So you don't have to vote today. Now, if you did vote today, because it's a special meeting, it would need to be ratified according to our board
Yeah.
rules, right? So even then, it would still need to be ratified.
Yeah. And then for something, and when you talk about unanimous consent, is it unanimous consent is needed to consider it or just unanimous?
Both.
Okay, so unanimous consent to consider it, and then also it would need to be unanimous consent to pass it today?
Correct.
Okay.
I thought those rules on the unanimous consent for bringing it up was for an ordinance, not for a resolution.
I apologize.
My understanding, I thought, was that was unanimous consent was to bring up an ordinance versus this is a resolution, which has a different set of rules.
Let me just go look at my, notes here. I was just in the board rules.
I mean, I'm happy to do whatever we need to do to talk about it. I don't know that we need to, I want us at least to be able to talk about it today, so whatever needs to happen for that.
So if we want to talk about it, we can talk about it. It's a public meeting. It is something that's been,
Okay, but
you know,
she
shared
had
with the
talked
board and posted to meeting materials, so we can,
I see that.
we can talk about it without
Doesn't even know that if it
any
needs to
further,
be,
you know, action. If we wanted to consider it as a voting item, then there needs to be unanimous consent to consider it today, and then there would need to be unanimous vote to pass it today.
I don't think the unanimous
Actually, I don't
consent
think,
to
it's, you don't
consider
need
it is
to
right.
unanimous consent for a resolution. That, it's my understanding it's for an ordinance, so we should get that clarified.
Okay, yeah,
And I'd like to point out that it's that you need a unanimous to, I've got to make sure I put the thing right. So I didn't see here that you, the difference, I can't find the difference between whether or not a resolution or an ordinance is going to be treated differently off the top of my head, so I apologize. I can look that up while we're here, but that was your initial question, right, Chair, or Commissioner?
yeah,
Does anyone object?
Right,
no, I mean, I think I'm happy to have a conversation about this.
okay, and then I'll.
So do you oppose having potential action on it? I mean, I do think we should get the ruling, because it's my understanding we just needed 3 to actually bring up a resolution versus
Yeah,
an ordinance.
I mean, can we start talking about it and give her a minute to look it up as requested, and then we can come back to this question?
I'm fine with that.
Because I want to talk about it.
Yeah, me too. I want to talk about it as well.
Jump right in.
Well, thank